Guns. They look cool, they sound cool, hell, they are cool. When you look at a gun, you only focus on most of these things. How it feels, the recoil, the reload, and the sound it gives off. Not much goes to a person's mind when playing an arena-based shooter of how does the gun actually work. Most time, there's not even too much to care. In this case, Team Fortress 2, having been around for over 10 years and the guns it showcases. A lot of people just don't really care. But what of the people who do care? How do these guns actually work if they were put into real life standards? Does it add up? Or is it video game logic where bullet goes in gun and then bang? Now we are aware that there is a video covered by GameSpot by a firearms expert, but it doesn't go into too much detail, but there was a lot of firearms that weren't covered with some other weapons. And that's exactly what we're going to cover. Now before we get started, we want to point out that not all this information may be correct, and that these are just theories. The guns, ammunition types, or even general ballistics are just assumption and guesses of the comparison to their real world counterparts. There will be timestamps if you want to skip to a preferred class, or you can just start to watch it here, because there is a lot to talk about. First up on this list is Scout and his scattergun archetype of weapons. Weapons such as the stock scattergun, babyface blaster, and the backscatter have one thing in common: their shell ejection. Since this is a semi-automatic shotgun that shoots pellets, upon every shot, the shell should have enough force to shift the bolt and chamber the next shell. In this case, every scattergun type does not. Instead, it's kept inside the drum and ejected with another 4 to 6 shells to shoot. Which comes to our next theory, and that's the ammunition feed. General 00 12G buckshot would be loaded, since every time the scattergun is fully reloaded or partially reloaded, the lever is actioned through, feeding the next lot of shells. However, lever actions in most games and guns today are used to action through the next shell, similar to how a pump, semi, or full auto weapon cycles their casings. So we have 6 shells, feeded into the chamber ready to fire, on a double barrel. Again, another peeve, getting technical. Then since this is a double barrel, except for the babyface blaster which is a single barrel, this would mean the shells would have to have been fed on both sides, meaning the drum would look similar to the Striker 12, which also has this drum. Now, it is possible for the scattergun to actually feed through 2 shells into both chambers, but that would mean the gun requires a lot of internal work to feed them through. However, the backscatter is actually possible due to its design, to feed through the shells due to having a manual rotate handle which allows both the Striker 12 and the backscatter to hold its shells and feed through to the barrels, and work with a lever action if you get very technical with it. Since the backscatter has 2 separate jump compartments and the manual rotation handle to feed through these shells, it sort of works. It would somehow work if the loading port was shifted a bit higher. The loading port is located at the bottom of each weapon, which is generally used to reload a shotgun or ammunition into a weapon that support these. Usually one of these support a tube to hold the shells, and in rare cases will you ever see 2 of these fitted into a gun, unless if it's a break action, which supports 2 barrels. Now keep that comment in your head. Upon every actioned reload and what we have heard, the scattergun holds 30 reserve shells in its drum, has a single loading port, and keeps its exhausted shells in its drum until it's actioned every time to remove 1 shell at a time. It stores the next lot of shells somewhere and pulls out every shot shell similar to a semi-auto. In this case, this is not possible on a semi-automatic lever action shotgun. The closest possible way for the scatter shotgun is to work is shown on hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades, and similar to how the KSG and the DSP-12, where they both have double loading ports and are able to be fed through either a single or double barrel tubes. Since the DSP shoots double barrel and is pumped after both shots are fired, the scattergun would have to be loaded 1 shell at a time until it hits 6 in the tube, or in this case, 3 in the tube. This is coming to the theory that the scattergun is having 2 tubes possibly stored under the handrail. This would have to work similar to a general shotgun, feeding a shell in each action. And a double barrel reload is possible. However, we need another ejection port to allow 2 shells to be ejected, since this is the only way to eject these shells together without a jam. This would be possible if the shotgun was a break action. Sorry Icarus, your shotgun reload is kind of busted. We got one more weapon as well, the Lugamorth. Valve, you are aware how a slide on a pistol works, yeah? Where does the shell ejection come into place? Rocket launchers are really designed in one way: single projectile, single tube, and an area to compensate for backblast. In video games, where we see a magazine type of rocket launcher or even multi-barrel, all have a back exhaust for backblast. And this is crucial, as there is a lot of kinetic force being pushed out to make a rocket accelerate out of the tube. which can lead to serious body injury if you're in the way. So what would happen if you feed 4 rockets down the tube? Absolutely nothing, according to Team Fortress. This is where the rockets just get shot out and that's it. Even reloading, there is no consequence for even blocking the exhaust of a rocket launcher with 3 additional rockets. This is a tricky one as there is no real place for a rocket to go or even to be fed through. However, we are doing theories here. Technically, there is enough room for 4 rockets to fit from the tip of the barrel, but as far as storing them without even the chance of accidental detonation, a cover for the rockets leaving, a separate inside tube similar to how a shotgun works with its shells. But how about the vent for a backblast? And this is where it gets tricky from comparing a video game to real life. It is really hard to say. The rocket launcher would have to have a tube similar to a shotgun, but however, it would have to have a bit of an arced plate that would pinch the rocket to not rattle inside. Realistically, this weapon makes no sense. As we move on to shotguns, the weapons themselves are pretty much close to as what they can get. The shotguns are very simple design and not a lot of thought or work goes into their design since the load underneath is a pump action.
How can we possibly pick on Pyros? Is there any possible way? Well no, everything on the Pyro makes logical sense. The pilot flame is there, the cylinder containing the LPG gas is there, and there is pressure in the trigger to push some gas out, and even what we can assume is how hard Pyro pulls the trigger allows a backblast for redirecting projectiles with force. It seemed bust until there was another weapon which didn't act like the general Pyro weapons. The Dragon's Fury. The Dragon's Fury is a projectile based flamethrower, rather than the traditional flamethrowers which just pump out constant gas. And even looking at the design, it's hard to assume what can be used as an ammunition, that fires in a projectile, sticks to enemies as well as burns them. Well, that is at least until we look at another item, the gas passer and thermal thruster, which both use fuel as a source of their use, which allows us to assume this weapon also uses fuel. But what type of fuel? And I'm probably going to be conceived as an anarchist with the amount of Google searching I had to search about fuel. According to Argonne, diesel is much less flammable than gasoline. In a car, it takes intense pressure or sustained flame to ignite diesel. On the other hand, if you toss a match into a pool of gasoline, it won't even touch the surface. It ignites the vapors above the surface. What this means is that the type of fuel used is a form of diesel gel or diesel mix, and pushed out with force, allowing it to shoot the way it does. I probably will go on to watch this after googling this.
Demoman's arsenal is what you think. Grenades, detonation, and anything with explosives. In his case, big boom. However, we need to go through to the similar mechanical structure of Scout Scattergun because this is very important. The sticky bomb launcher acts very similar and again pulls back the bolt to load more shots as a semi-automatic weapon. However, this time around we can see the bolt is pushed back upon every shot, and this is what I mean with semi-automatics feeding the next shell or the next bullet. This does make a little bit more understanding on how the gun operates, but as far as ammo capacity, it doesn't. Both the scattergun and grenade launchers have a drum magazine, which as that said before, would only have to work if the cartridge, or in this case the grenade, is loaded into the drum seen on H3VR. Or as we can take an example of Icarus' reload animation here. Honestly, before I continue on further, I would recommend that you go watch his reload animations, because a lot of these have helped us with the research of these weapons. Plus, the video is fantastic. The video is in the description below. Back on topic. We see that it is possible for the drum to be ejected and cocked with the next shot, which makes a lot of sense. Overall, not a difficult one. And I say not difficult as the loose cannon is realistically the same thing as a soldier's rocket launcher. It just sticks 4 in a single tube. As well as the magazine capacity of these weapons, we really aren't gonna bother. It's Valve being Valve. You've probably skipped to this because you're a heavy main. But for this one, and yes, you are right, the minigun is closest to a real weapon. When people think miniguns, they usually go of something like Call of Duty, and you'd be exactly correct, as this weapon is inspired by the M134 Gatling gun. If this is the case, the weapon would fire 7.62 by 51mm custom-tooled NATO rounds. And this would be the closest thing, as Heavy in the trailer is shown holding a centerfire bullet, and even the ejection cartridge are centerfire. Overall, this gun makes a lot of sense in-game. The minigun fires 4 rounds every shot, meaning the capacity of this weapon has 800 rounds in the actual cylinder itself, which means it's about $160,000. But with the MVM ammo capacity upgrade to 500, it is actually spot on. The caliber of the bullet would actually fit itself, as its drum is huge, and how these bullets would feed would actually require a tight belt inside. Looking at the M134 Gatling gun and the stock minigun, the designs of these weapons itself would act very similarly, and this would be the case for the stock minigun. It would be a matter of making sure it clicks into the frame itself, and a separate motor inside where the drum connects would feed the bullets through. And somehow with the cartridge ejection, it even works with this, if we put the bottom part and not where Valve put it. Other miniguns such as the Natasha, Hulong Heater, and the Brass Beast all work in these ways. The Tommy Slab, however, acts identical to the Thompson machine gun, as this is a single barrel and has an ejection port to the side. Really, it's just a big machine gun with a drum mag.
We really couldn't find anything that was out of whack for the engineer. The weapons he uses are fairly straightforward, such as his pump-action shotguns, semi-auto pistols, and even the Widowmaker, even though it bears a resemblance to the M1216 rotary shotgun. The only thing we could nitpick was the sentry gun, its caliber, and how it actually works. As far as we are aware, it's a heavy caliber tripod Gatling sentry system, according to the Meet the Engineer trailer. But what classifies as heavy caliber? 50 cal? 7.62mm? For that we had to turn to Google again, because Australia is starved of firearms and even information about them. This is what we got from the results. A 50 BMG used in a Browning M2, 50 AE used in Desert Eagles, 12.7 by 108mm used in Anti-Material, 500 S&W Magnum, or 50 Beowulf used in AR-15s. The latter actually makes a lot of sense, considering both the sentry gun and the AR-15 eject centerfire rifle cartridges, as opposed to something that will rip a head off or have a lot of weight to the bullet. Capacity-wise, the TF2 wiki says the ammo capacity of the sentry gun is 150 rounds for a level 1, 200 rounds at level 2, which is more than plenty, and 20 rocket salvos, or about 80 total rockets fired for a level 3. The stock sentry, according to us, has the space within it to holster this ammunition. The mini sentry, however, would need to use a smaller caliber due to its size and damage, also because it fires a lot quicker with its smaller components. This means its caliber is probably around the 9mm mark, also supported by the fact that the mini sentry doesn't dispose of its shells. In regard to how the sentry gun is loaded, it's a bit tricky, but doable, with the bullets being fed from both sides into the feed chutes. As for missiles being loaded, these would be stored next to the bullets and fed through, similar to how bowling pins are readied in a bowling alley. And this totally makes sense, especially when comparing this to the Sentry manual, which sort of proves how Sentry gun feed actually works.
Medic syringe gun is what you would expect. A gun that shoots needles at a slow velocity. While we can't really make sense of how it fires, H3VR does the best way to help us find out. The weapon itself is air compressed, as there is an air compressor nozzle just below the handle, meaning this would act similar to a paintball gun, for instance. This involves the force of the canister or compressed air to be pushed out and reset upon every time a needle is fired. Or in this case, this would act similar to both how a semi-auto and a double action revolver, seeing as how the needles need to rotate the next shot to be loaded. As far as the part of here being ejected and being pushed back in, we can only assume this is the air release, sort of similar to a plunger. To be honest, we have no idea what it is, nor do I think H3VR know as well. This one really needed some math involved, because there is a lot to cover on this. Mainly first, the caliber of the gun itself, and how 25 bullets are able to fit in this weapon, and how it's able to be fed through a bolt action. To make things simple, we will cover the stock sniper as it's more commonly used. The first part of this segment is finding the caliber of the bullet itself, and there's a bit to assess in the Meet the Sniper trailer, as there are two cases that need to be solved. Can the bullet pierce through a skull and come out on the other side? And can it pierce through steel? For this, we need to look at what the rifle itself can actually load, and H3VR and SFM have us covered. For this, the size of the bullet ejects from, the size is actually small, but not too small. High calibers will work, but anything too big such as the 308 may be a bit too big. In the Meet the Sniper trailer, it's seen the bullet ejecting is indeed a centerfire, and after doing some more analysis on the trailer itself, we had a look at the two shots I've mentioned before. In this first shot here, it is seen that the bullet goes straight through Heavy's skull and hits Demoman's bottle, causing him to lose another eye. On the next camera shot, we can see where Sniper is aiming from. We can roughly guess the distance of this is about 25 to 50 meters. And on the second shot is with Soldier. The zoom isn't as close as it was, meaning it would be about 50 to 75 meters, which means the bullet itself would have to be able to pierce through effectively at that distance. This is starting to sound something similar to a 17 HMR, which would make a lot of sense, as both the bullet is small enough to fit into the chamber, pierce through steel, and still be effective at that range. However, that cartridge was made back in 2002, and for the sake of the theory, let's try to make any bullets before 1968, where TF2 took place. And this is where it gets a little bit easier. Since the bullet can't be a 22 due to the lead tips being that soft and not having enough penetration, rimfires are out of the question. This would mean that the bullet would be appropriate would be a 222. Its centerfire has enough velocity to pierce through steel and a human skull and come out through on the other side. The proof should be all here. But there's one more thing we've got to cover, and that's how 25 bullets fits into this thing. Despite the weapon being a bolt action, there is no magazine shown on or in the weapon itself, which puts this down to an internal magazine, or better yet, a single shot bolt action. But we are going off of what the game gives us, and it doesn't show Sniper once loading a new bullet into the chamber, besides in the trailer. And this is tricky as we've got to work with a weird design, but it is clearly possible for the sniper rifle to store 25 shots in this rifle itself. It is possible that the bullets are crammed in there. Or the next possibility is that the internal magazine design has been modified so much that it follows through to the front of the stock. I'll explain. This is what an internal magazine looks like. And the weapon you see on screen is the Kar98K, which uses this general form of feeding. And this is a general magazine, what you see on an M4, an AK-47, or any sort of standard military rifle today. If you were to bend the magazine with the shape of the stock of the rifle so it feeds through, you would be able to have ammo stored inside the stock. It is very confusing, but it's probably the only way for the stock sniper rifle to actually feed through the bullets while feeding a new bullet every time. But what of other weapons? How do they store ammo? Well, other weapons such as the Heatman's Heat Marker and the Sydney Sleeper would have to store in the same design of the stock sniper rifle in terms of ammo feeding. While we look at the Orpahan, Machina, and the Classic, they have magazines, which makes more sense. Which leaves the Bazaar bargain. The bottom pipe that you see here is a tubular magazine, best commonly known in shotguns and lever actions, which can store the capacity of ammunition. And the thing I've mentioned this whole video, depending on the length determines how many can be stored. General small rimfires can hold up to 10, and depending on the ammo and length, the gun can hold over 20 bullets. And we actually found a weapon that acts identical to the Bazaar bargain, the Remington Model 34, a bolt action tube fed that loads a bullet into the tube and feeds through its bolt action. I'm not going to lie, that was a lot to take in and a lot to analyze. While it may be simple on paper, it is still maybe one of the toughest ones to actually think about. Okay, let's move on to the spy before the AFP thinks I'm not doing this for educational purposes. I'm pretty sure people who make guns in video games probably take their time with each bit and piece of detail to make sure the gun looks and feels great. But if it's unrealistic, at least some people give it a reason why it works that way. But for whatever reason, every revolver that the spy uses has one thing in common: their reload, and it's missing part of the weapon itself. Upon every reload, spy is shown reloading the revolver, and for whatever reason these cartridges are still in there. These centerfire cartridges should be ejected with the ejection rod, which is shown on all the revolvers, but it's nowhere to be seen on the cylinder itself. This is a common part of a revolver today, which uses that side reload. There is no known ejection port on any revolvers or any case ejecting shown in third person. Even then, revolvers can only eject their casing from the gun itself from the ejection rod, or if it's a break action. As far as what ammunition is used, it seemed fairly straightforward that these are based off their real counterparts. The stock revolver is modelled after the Colt Diamondback, which uses a 38 Special. The Ambassador is modelled after the Colt Python, and the Enforcer is modelled after the SW Model 19, which both use 357 Magnum. The Deus Ex Diamondback also uses this caliber, but we couldn't find anything that matches, but it does look similar to the Unica 6. The Big Kill, which is modelled after the SW Model 29, uses 44 Magnum, and the El Latangre, which uses the model after the German Nagant M8195, uses a 7.6 by 38mm cartridge. And that should be all it, unless I mention that the cylinder or hammer don't move at all. And I've noticed while making this video, they actually don't move at all. Well, look who finally decided to upload. Thank you all so much till the very end of this video, and it probably took me way too long than anticipated, but I finally got there in the end. I also want to thank Whammo and Jack5 for their segments and for helping me on the research on this video, and PopTop89 for the recording of the VR footage for hot dogs, horseshoes and hand grenades. I'll be posting a link to their channels down below if you want to check them out. On that note of following people, you can follow me on Twitch where I stream from time to time, and if you also want to join the Discord community, I have decided to bring back the XenoGenic Shack Discord server where you can keep up to date on where I go live or make new content. Links to my platforms are here on screen, or you can click the link below to find them. Once again, if you haven't done so, click the like button and please subscribe if you enjoyed today's video, and make sure to hit the bell from when I make new content. For now, I'm XenoGenic, and I'll see you in the next video.